The first thing Aurora Bennett noticed about the evening was the way the light fell wrong. She stood at the center of her own showroom, Bennett Automotive Group, Miami's most prestigious luxury car dealership, wearing a hot pink blazer over beach shorts and heels that caught every chandelier beam in the room. And she thought, this is not how light is supposed to fall in my building. The chandeliers were new, Italian crystal, installed 3 weeks ago specifically for tonight's gala. $40,000 of illumination hanging from her ceiling, and still the light fell wrong, too warm, too amber, like the last hour of a summer afternoon instead of the clean white brightness of commerce and success. She should have told the decorator. Aurora, her assistant, Diane, appeared at her elbow, like a woman who had learned to materialize silently or face consequences. Senator Caldwell is asking for you at the North Bar. Tell him I'm circulating. He's been asking for 15 minutes. Then he's had 15 minutes to enjoy my whiskey collection. Aurora lifted her champagne flute without drinking from it. I'll get to him. Diane vanished. The gala was a success by every measurable standard. 67 guests, a mix of Miami's business elite and philanthropic circuit, all here under the banner of Bennett Automotive's annual charity drive for veterans' families. Aurora had selected the cause herself, not for optics, though the optics were undeniably good, but because she had grown up watching her grandfather, a Korean War veteran who had lied about his age to enlist at 16, struggle with a VA system that seemed designed to exhaust rather than serve. When she built her first dealership at 21, the Veterans Fund was the first check she wrote. She was 24 now, 3 dealerships, 1 aviation subsidiary, a real estate portfolio that her CFO described as aggressively healthy, and a heart that felt, on most evenings, like a room that had been very carefully locked from the inside. The showroom floor gleamed, 8 cars on display, 6 for sale, 2 for pure visual impact, a matte black Dodge Viper that nobody was meant to touch, and her own personal Dodge Challenger in a shade of pink so specific it had required a custom order from the factory. The pink Challenger sat near the entrance like a signature, like a calling card, like a way of saying, this is whose house you're in. Aurora moved through her guests the way she moved through board meetings, with purpose, with attention, with the particular quality of presence that made people feel simultaneously welcomed and slightly evaluated. She shook hands. She remembered names. She asked Senator Caldwell about his granddaughter's soccer team, because she had read that detail in a briefing note 3 days ago, and she believed that people deserved to feel remembered. She was good at this. She was very, very good at performing the version of herself that kept the empire running. It was near the back of the showroom, beside the vintage Mustang she kept purely for sentimental reasons, a 1967 fastback in Highland green that had belonged to her grandfather, that she first felt it, not heard, not saw, felt. The particular change in atmospheric pressure that meant something had shifted in the room. She turned. He was standing near the entrance, a tall man in a dark blazer that looked like it had been bought for a different kind of occasion and worn here anyway, out of respect or necessity or both. 30 or so, she guessed. Broad-shouldered in the way of men who have carried real weight, not gym weight, not aesthetic weight, but the weight of equipment and responsibility and other human beings. His skin was dark, a warm, deep brown, and he had a smile on his face that was directed at nothing in particular, just a natural resting expression that said, I find the world, generally speaking, acceptable. In his right hand, he was turning a car key, not nervously, not absently, just turning it. A slow, steady rotation between his fingers, like a man who had done this so many times. It had become the way his hands rested when they had nothing else to hold. Aurora watched him for 3 seconds before she realized she was staring. She looked away. She looked back. The light caught him differently than it caught everyone else in the room, and she knew, on an intellectual level, that this was because he was taller than most of the other guests, and the chandeliers were calibrated for average height. But she did not feel it on an intellectual level. She felt it as something older and less rational, something that lived below the part of the brain that runs businesses and signs contracts and remembers senators' granddaughters' soccer teams. She felt it as recognition, which was impossible because she did not know this man. She turned to a passing server and exchanged her untouched champagne for a glass of sparkling water, buying herself a moment of motion and normalcy. When she looked back toward the entrance, he was still there, now examining the hood of a 2024 Corvette Z06 in carbon flash, not the Corvette she kept for display, but one of the 4 sale models, with the focused appreciation of a man who actually understood what he was looking at. He crouched slightly to look at the front intake, stood, tilted his head, turned the key. She was moving before she decided to move. This happened to her sometimes. The gap between intention and action collapsing in situations that her instincts classified as important before her conscious mind caught up. It had happened the first time she walked into a bank to ask for a business loan at 19. The morning she got the call that her grandfather had collapsed and was being admitted to the hospital. The afternoon she signed the papers on her first building. Her body moved toward significance before her brain issued the order. She crossed the showroom floor, heels quiet on the polished concrete, and stopped beside him. The intake is 30% larger than the previous generation, she said, if you're looking at airflow efficiency. He straightened and looked at her, and there it was. His eyes were a very specific shade, not brown, not hazel, but something in between that caught light and gave it back in a way that felt almost amber, almost gold. A color that was, she realized with a sensation she could not immediately name, the exact color of her own eyes when she stood in certain light. She had never seen another person with her eyes. She had thought for her entire life that they were singular. Her grandfather had called them winter honey eyes and said they came from a great-grandmother nobody had met. Her ex-husband, during the brief and ill-advised marriage she tried not to think about, had said they were unusual. Her optometrist noted the pigmentation as a genetic rarity. This man had her eyes, not similar, not comparable. Her eyes, the precise shade, the precise quality of light they held and released, the specific way the pupils sat in that amber gold iris, like a dark stone in warm water. You know your cars, he said. His voice was unhurried. A Gulf Coast accent somewhere underneath the standard American, somewhere southern but sun-worn, like the accent of a man who'd left his hometown young and carried just enough of it to keep him honest. I own this building, Aurora said. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, exactly. More like a recalibration. He looked at her more fully. She watched him take in the pink blazer, the beach shorts, the heels, the particular quality of stillness she carried. Aurora Bennett, he said. It wasn't a question. You know who I am. Veterans Fund invited a few of us to attend. He extended his hand. Marcus Cole, Commander, United States Navy. She shook his hand. His grip was straightforward, not performing strength, just using it naturally. Your active duty, she asked. Transitioning out, 6 more weeks. He said it the way men say things they've made peace with, even if the peace costs something. Figured it was time. How long? 13 years. He turned the key again, once. A single rotation. Started when I was 18. Aurora did the math without thinking about it. 18 plus 13 was 31. She'd guessed him at 30, close enough to trust her instincts. What will you do? She asked. After. I have a daughter. The smile came back, slightly different now, warmer, private. The kind of smile that belonged to a person rather than a social occasion. She's 5. She's been waiting 13 years for me to be somewhere she can find me. She's 5. She's only been waiting 5 years. She's been waiting, he said, since before she knew how to count them. Aurora looked at him for a moment. Then she looked back at the Corvette. This one's not for display, she said. It's available. I know. I'm looking. He crouched again to examine the rocker panels. You restore the Mustang yourself? She followed his gaze to the Highland Green fastback across the room. My grandfather and I did. I was 17. It took 11 months. The bodywork on the passenger door is slightly different from the driver's side. He said it without judgment, just observation. Someone changed approach partway through. He got sick, Aurora said. In the middle of it. I finished the passenger side on my own. Marcus stood. He looked at the Mustang for a moment, then back at her. Did it come out the way you wanted? It came out the way it needed to. He nodded slowly, the key still in his fingers, and there was something in the gesture that Aurora felt reach into her chest and hold something there briefly before releasing it. She should get back to Senator Caldwell. She should circulate. She had 67 guests and a charitable cause and an event that had cost her team 3 months of planning. She did not move. The Corvette, she said. You came to buy or to look? Look, tonight. Buy, maybe next month. He glanced down at the key. I drive a 19 right now. Black. It's been good to me. A black Corvette. Is that a judgment? It's an observation. She smiled. A real one, which surprised her. Black's the most popular exterior color for sports cars. Statistically speaking, it's the least individual choice. Or it's the right choice for a man who wants to drive the car instead of be looked at in it. That's a valid philosophy. Konk, what color would you buy? Aurora looked at him. I'd buy the car that made me feel something when I walked up to it in the morning. That's not an answer. That's the only answer that matters. He laughed. Just a short, genuine laugh. The kind that didn't perform anything. She felt it in her sternum. Commander, she said, and she wasn't sure why she used the title, except that it created a small, necessary distance. Enjoy the evening. The whiskey selection is particularly good if you move past the bar display to the back shelf. She turned to leave. She had taken 3 steps when he said, "You have unusual eyes." She stopped, not because the observation was remarkable. People mentioned her eyes with some frequency. She stopped because of the tone, the way he said it, not as a compliment, not as an opening line, but as a man stating something that had puzzled him slightly, and he was simply naming the puzzle. She turned back. "Yes," she said. "I've never seen that color before." She held his gaze for a long moment. The amber gold light in his eyes held hers in return. "Neither have I," she said. And then she walked away, very carefully, toward the North Bar and Senator Caldwell and the 67 people who had paid to be here. And she did not let herself look back, even though every cell in her body was turning toward him, like a compass finding north. The gala ran until 11. Aurora worked the room with a focus that was almost painful in its precision, because precision was what she had. It was the thing she could control when everything else in her felt slightly undone. She talked about the Veterans Fund. She talked about Q4 projections with a developer from Coral Gables. She posed for 3 photographs. She gave a 6-minute speech at 9 o'clock that she had memorized rather than read from notes, because reading from notes was a thing people did when they were uncertain, and she was not uncertain. She was not uncertain. She was, however, aware of exactly where Marcus Cole was in the room at all times, not watching him, nothing so obvious, just aware. The way you are aware of a sound that keeps recurring just below the threshold of identification. He moved through the event with the same unhurried quality he'd brought to examining the Corvette. Present, attentive, unperformed. She saw him in conversation with 2 veterans who'd come as guests of the fund, and the ease of it, the way he leaned slightly in when someone spoke, the way he laughed at something one of them said and then immediately asked a follow-up question, was the ease of a man who genuinely liked other people. She found it unexpectedly affecting. At 10:15, she noticed him standing alone near the vintage Mustang again, looking at it with his head tilted slightly, the key turning between his fingers. He wasn't looking at her. He wasn't tracking her position in the room. He was just looking at the car with the same focused consideration he'd given it before. She told herself she was going to check on the catering station. She went to the Mustang instead. Still looking at it, she said, "You put your whole self into the passenger door," he said, without looking away from the car. "You can see it if you know what you're looking for. The driver's side is your grandfather's work. The passenger side is yours." His approach was more systematic, even pressure, consistent overlap. "Yours is," he tilted his head, "more intuitive, like you were feeling your way through it." Aurora stood beside him and looked at the car she had lived with for 7 years. "I was 17, she said, "and he was sick, and I didn't know if he was going to be there the next morning. I was feeling my way through a lot of things." Marcus finally looked at her, not the social glance, not the measured assessment of a first meeting. He looked at her the way people looked at each other when the small talk was done, and what remained was something more serious. "Did he make it?" he asked. 3 more years, she said. "He saw me open the first dealership." "Good." "Yes." They stood in silence for a moment. Across the room, a small band had begun playing something quiet and instrumental. Aurora became aware that several guests were beginning to drift toward the exit in the natural rhythm of a winding down evening. She should go say goodbyes. She should thank a people for coming. She should be the version of herself that kept the empire running. "My daughter," Marcus said, "has your eyes." Aurora turned to look at him. He said it the same way he'd said everything else tonight, quietly as a fact, without dramatics. But she heard the weight under it, the thing he was not quite saying alongside the thing he was saying. "My daughter has eyes that nobody else in my family has. Nobody in her mother's family either. We had it looked at when she was a baby. Doctors said it was a genetic anomaly, a particular pigmentation pattern that's rare. They didn't know where it came from." He paused. "She's been asking me since she was 3 where her eyes came from. I tell her they're magic eyes. She accepts this." "She's 5, Aurora said carefully. "She accepts a lot." "Yeah." He looked back at the Mustang. but she's going to stop accepting it soon. The silence stretched between them, warm and complicated, like the light in this room. What happened to her mother? Aurora asked, because the question was already sitting in the air between them, and not asking, it felt more unnatural than asking it. She left when Lily was 8 months old. We were young. We weren't ready for each other, and she wasn't ready for a child. She made the choice she made. He said it without bitterness. Something she was beginning to understand was a characteristic of him, the absence of bitterness, where bitterness would have been completely justified. I don't think about it much anymore. Lily does better with one present parent than 2 miserable ones. You raised her while on active duty. I had help, my mother, my sister, and I timed my deployments as best I could, though. He paused. There's no good time to leave a baby. You just leave and you come back, and you hope that coming back counts for enough. Aurora thought of her grandfather, who had come back from Korea and spent 30 years trying to relearn how to sleep without one eye open. Does it? She asked. Count for enough? Ask me when she's 30. She looked at him, and he looked at her, and the room was getting quieter around them as more guests moved toward the exit. I should say my goodbyes, Aurora said. You should. She turned toward the room. Then she turned back. She would ask herself, later, many times, what exactly she had been thinking. The answer she would arrive at, eventually, was that she had not been thinking at all. That thought had vacated the premises in that particular way it did during the moments that mattered most. During the hospital hallway, when she'd gotten the call about her grandfather. During the morning she'd signed her divorce papers. During the instant before every decision that had turned out to be the right one. She stepped forward. She put her hand on his arm, and she kissed him. Not with hesitation, not tentatively. A real kiss, brief and certain. The kind that doesn't ask permission because it already knows the answer. He went very still. She pulled back, looked at him. His expression was not confused or alarmed. It was something more complicated than that, something searching. The key had stopped turning in his fingers, and then it hit her, not gradually, not as a slow dawning, as an impact, sudden and total, the way memory sometimes returns, not retrieved, but ambushed. The smell of him, up close, was a particular combination of whatever soap he used, and something underneath it, something sun and salt and warm. And it was the smell of a summer 17 years ago, and a boy with the same amber gold eyes and a laugh she had forgotten that she remembered, and a park bench in Nashville, Tennessee, where she was 7 years old and he was 8, and they had sat for an entire afternoon while his mother talked to her grandfather about veteran services, and he had said. She stepped back. The memory was so sudden and so total that she had to put her hand on the hood of the Mustang to steady herself. "Are you all right?" Marcus asked. She looked at him. She looked at his eyes. She looked at the key in his hand, which was a black Corvette key, and she thought about a boy who had loved cars with a bright, total love the way children love things before they learn to be careful about it. And she thought about the way this man looked at the Corvette with a focused consideration that was the grown version of that same love. "I'm fine," she said. She stopped. "Have you ever been to Nashville?" Marcus looked at her carefully. "I grew up in Nashville." The floor seemed to shift very slightly under her heels. "I spent summers there," she said, "until I was 12. My grandfather had a friend from the service." She stopped again. "His name was Robert Cole." Marcus's expression changed. "That's my father's name." Neither of them spoke. The band was playing something very quiet. The last few guests were moving toward the coat check. Diane was across the room looking at Aurora with an expression that asked, without asking, whether everything was all right. "You were 8 years old?" Aurora said, very quietly. "And you told me you were going to have a black Corvette someday." Marcus Cole looked at her for a long moment. His hand was still around the key. Something moved across his face. Not recognition exactly, but the shape of something that recognition had once occupied. An outline. A place where a memory should be. "I don't remember," he said. And the way he said it, not dismissive, not denying, but genuinely, carefully honest, told her something. "I lost some things a few years ago. A mission went wrong. I lost some time, some faces." "How much time?" Doctors couldn't say exactly. Childhood, mostly, before about 14. He paused. "I remember my parents. I remember my sister. Big things. But details, people, places." He shook his head slowly. "They're mostly gone." Aurora looked at the man in front of her. The man with her eyes who had grown up in Nashville, whose father was named Robert, who had loved black Corvettes since before he could hold the key steadily. The man who had no memory of the summers they had spent as children, running between their grandfather's conversations about a war neither grandfather talked about at home, building small, imaginary cities in the dirt at the edge of a park. while the August heat pressed down on Nashville and the afternoon went gold. The man whose daughter had eyes that nobody in either family could explain. "Marcus," she said. "Yeah, I think we've known each other for a very long time." He held her gaze. The key was still in his hand. He wasn't turning it anymore. "Tell me," he said. She told him, not all of it. Not yet. Not here, with the catering staff beginning to clear glassware and Diane hovering at a respectful distance, and the last guests collecting their jackets. She told him the shape of it, the summers, the park, the two old veterans who had been trying, in that quiet way that men of their generation tried at things, to rebuild something social in a life that the war had rearranged. The afternoons, the cars they'd drawn in the dirt. His insistence, at 8 years old, that when he grew up, he was going to own the fastest black car in the state of Tennessee. She told him that she remembered the last summer. She was 12, he was 13, when his family had moved, and her grandfather had mentioned, casually, that Robert's boy had enlisted in the Navy the moment he turned 18, and wasn't that something? She hadn't thought about it again, or rather, she had thought about it exactly as much as a person thinks about a child friendship that ended with geography and time and the ordinary losses of growing up. Not with grief, exactly. With the low-grade wistfulness of a door that closed before you fully understood what was behind it. Marcus listened. He had the quality, rare and useful, of listening with his whole attention rather than with part of it, while the rest prepared a response. He stood beside the Highland green Mustang that her grandfather had helped her restore, and he listened to the history of something he could not remember, and his expression was the expression of a man trying to read the shape of a country he once knew, from a map that no longer matches the terrain. When she finished, there was a pause. "The dreams," he said. "What?" "I have dreams sometimes. Not nightmares. Not the kind the department therapist asks about." A small, complicated smile. "Just a green park. Summer. A girl with yellow hair. I never see her face clearly." He looked at Aurora. "I assumed it was something I'd made up. The brain does that after a TBI. It fills in gaps with texture, with invented things. Maybe it wasn't invented. Maybe not." He looked at the car for a moment, then back at her. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Why did you kiss me?" It was a fair question. She had been waiting for it. "I don't know," she said, which was the honest answer. "Something about you was familiar, and I acted on it before I knew why." She paused. "I'm sorry if that was—" "Don't apologize." He said it simply, not curtly. "Just don't. I'm trying to figure out if I should be more surprised by all of this than I am." He turned the key once, and I don't think I should be, which is its own kind of strange. Aurora looked at him, this man with her eyes and her grandfather's friend's name, and a daughter whose unexplained eyes suggested a question neither of them had asked yet, a question that was forming at the back of her mind, with the slow gathering weight of something enormous finding its shape. "Your daughter?" she said carefully. "Lily." "Yeah. What do you know about her eyes?" "The genetic anomaly." Marcus's expression shifted, very slightly. Something attentive came into it. "The doctors said it was a recessive trait, unusual expression of a pigmentation gene. They said it could theoretically come from anywhere in the family line, somewhere back." He paused. "Why?" Aurora was quiet for a moment. "Because," she said slowly, "my grandfather told me, when I was young, that my eyes came from a great-grandmother I never met, a woman from a different part of the family. He said it was a trait that appeared and disappeared, skipped generations, sometimes completely." She looked at Marcus. "And the only other person I've ever seen with that eye color is standing in my showroom." Marcus was very still. "And now," Aurora continued, "you're telling me your daughter has the same eyes, from a trait that nobody in either of your families can account for." "Yeah," he said. "That's 3 of us," Aurora said, "with the same anomaly. That's not a coincidence." The silence that settled between them then was a different kind of silence from the ones that had come before. It had weight. It had the specific quality of a door standing open onto a room neither of them had been in, but which both of them, suddenly, needed to see. Diane appeared at Aurora's elbow with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had learned to time her interruptions. "Aurora, the last guests are leaving. Senator Caldwell wanted to say good night." Aurora did not look away from Marcus. "Tell him I'll be right there." "Of course." Diane retreated. "This is a lot for one evening," Marcus said. He wasn't complaining, just noting. "Yes, I'm going to need some time to think about what you told me." "Take all the time you need." He looked at her. He looked at the car. He looked back at her. "The Corvette," he said. "Can I come back next week to look at it properly?" And Aurora understood that this was not really about the Corvette. "The dealership opens at 9, she said. "I'm usually here by 8. 8 it is." He extended his hand. She shook it, and the touch was brief and ordinary, and absolutely nothing like the kiss had been. And somehow, that was exactly right. a return to a kind of normalcy that acknowledged, without discussing, that something had shifted tonight that could not be unshifted. "Good night, Commander," she said. "Good night, Miss Bennett." He walked toward the exit. She watched him go. At the door, he stopped once and looked back. Not at her, she thought at first, but at the Mustang, at the passenger door with its slightly different bodywork, at the evidence of a 17-year-old girl trying to finish something her grandfather had started. Then he looked at her and turned and walked out into the Miami night. Aurora stayed long after the caterers left. This was not unusual. She had always been the last to leave her own buildings, a habit from the early days, when leaving felt like releasing control of something too fragile to leave unguarded. She walked the showroom floor after the staff had gone, heels quiet on the polished concrete, moving between the cars the way she'd always thought of them, as objects with histories, with personalities, with the particular kind of dignity that came from being built to do something specific and doing it well. She stopped at the Mustang. She put her hand on the passenger door, her work, the 17-year-old girl's attempt to finish what a sick man had started, and she stood there in the quiet. She was trying to find the edges of what she felt. The kiss had been impulsive, which was unlike her. She was not an impulsive person. She had built her entire life on the opposite of impulse, on calculation and patience, and the willingness to wait for the right moment, not to manufacture one. The first loan at 19, she had spent 6 months preparing the paperwork before she walked into the bank. The first dealership expansion, she had modeled the projections 4 different ways before signing. She did not kiss strangers, except that he had not felt like a stranger. He had felt like the opposite of a stranger. He had felt like a word she'd been trying to remember, finally there on the tip of her tongue. She thought about Lily Cole, a 5-year-old girl with amber gold eyes who asked her father where her eyes came from and accepted magic eyes as an answer because she was 5, and 5-year-olds were capable of that. She thought about the trait her grandfather had described, appearing and disappearing across generations, surfacing when it chose. She thought about the mathematics of genetics, which she did not fully understand, but which her gut was nevertheless doing something with. She thought about 2 old men, veterans of the same war, sitting in a Nashville park while their grandchildren played in the dirt and drew imaginary cars with sticks. She thought about a boy with amber gold eyes who had said he was going to have a black Corvette. She thought about the way Marcus Cole had gone still when she kissed him, not surprised. Still, like a man who, for just a moment, had heard something he almost recognized. She turned off the showroom lights and stood for a moment in the dark. Miami outside was its usual enormous self, the distant sound of it, the light leaking in around the edges of the window shades, the persistent hum of a city that never fully understood the concept of night. She had always loved that about this city, its refusal to stop. She took out her phone. She found the number of the private investigator she had used twice before, once for a due diligence check on an acquisition, once for a personal matter she didn't think about. She stared at the number for a long moment. Then she put the phone away. Not yet, she told herself. She would think first. She would think carefully about what she was looking for and whether she had the right to look for it. She would consider what it meant to pull at a thread in someone else's history, a history they had already lost, and what came undone when you did. She walked to the back office, collected her keys, the pink Challenger's key, her daily reminder that she had built something from nothing, and it was hers, and moved toward the exit. At the door, she paused. She looked back at the showroom, at the Mustang, at the Corvette that a man named Marcus Cole had crouched beside and examined with the love of someone who understood these machines. She thought about a little girl with magic eyes. She thought about the question that little girl was going to stop accepting an insufficient answer to, and soon. And she thought about what it would mean if the connection she was feeling toward Marcus Cole was not just childhood nostalgia and shared genetics and the strangeness of an unexpected evening. What it would mean if it was something older, something that had been waiting, patient and unhurried, the way the most important things always wait, for exactly the right moment to surface. She stepped out into the Miami night. The pink Challenger was waiting where she'd left it. She sat in it for a moment without starting the engine, both hands on the wheel, feeling the specific weight of an evening that had started as one thing and ended as something entirely different, something she did not yet have words for and was not sure she should try to name. Then she started the car and pulled into the Miami traffic and drove home. already thinking about 8 o'clock on Monday morning. Marcus Cole drove home with his hands at 10 and 2, the way he'd driven since the accident, a habit the physical therapist had called grounding behavior, a way of maintaining control of the physical world when the internal one had gaps in it. His daughter was asleep by the time he got back to the apartment in Brickell. He could hear her breathing from the hallway, the particular rhythm of a child who sleeps with complete conviction, who gives themselves over to it without reservation. Mrs. Reyes, the neighbor who watched Lily in the evenings, was asleep in the armchair with a telenovela running mute on the television. He let her sleep for another 10 minutes while he stood in the doorway of Lily's room. She was curled on her side the way she always slept, one hand tucked under her cheek, her expression the expression of someone having a dream that was going very well. Her hair, dark, curly, inherited from him, spread out on the pillow around her face. He didn't need the light to know what her eyes looked like. He knew them the way he knew her laugh and her tendency to narrate her own actions as she did them. And now Lily's putting on her left shoe, and the exact weight of her when she fell asleep in his arms on car rides. The amber gold, the specific color that nobody could account for. He thought about Aurora Bennett, standing in her own showroom in a pink blazer with her grandfather's car behind her, telling him about a park in Nashville and 2 old men and a boy who had loved cars with the specific purity that children love things. He thought about the space in his memory where that should be. It was the strangest kind of loss, not painful, not dramatic, just an absence, a quiet, empty space shaped like a childhood. He knew the facts of it. Born in Nashville, Tennessee, father named Robert, mother named Elaine, a sister 3 years older. He knew the facts the way you know a city from a map. The texture was gone. The specific light of specific afternoons. The way summer felt on his skin in that particular city when he was 8 years old. And the world was still the size of a neighborhood. He thought about Aurora's eyes. He thought about Lily's eyes. He thought about the mathematics of what she had said, carefully and without quite saying all of it, about genetics and trait inheritance, and 3 people with the same anomaly that was supposed to be unexplainable. He didn't have the training she appeared to be doing in her head, the quiet calculus of someone used to figuring things out. But he had 13 years of military intelligence work, which meant he had a different version of the same thing. The ability to look at a set of facts and ask what they added up to. They added up to a question he did not have the answer to. A question that, he suspected, was going to require more than one morning at a car dealership to resolve. He thought about the kiss. He thought about the way it had hit him, not as violation, not as surprise, but as something more disorienting than either, as something almost like, I know this, which was impossible, which was exactly the kind of thing his brain generated sometimes. Post-TBI, the confabulation, the invented familiarity. He knew not to trust those feelings, except the girl with the yellow hair in the green park, except the dream he'd had so many times he had stopped considering it a notable. He went to Lily's bookshelf and found, between a picture book about elephants and a chapter book she was not quite old enough for, but had insisted on purchasing, a small, framed photo. Him at 8 years old, standing in front of his parents' house in Nashville, summer, squinting into the sun, turning a toy car key in his hand, a promotional thing from a dealership that had sponsored some local event, plastic, bright yellow. He stood there looking at it for a long time. He put it back. He gently woke Mrs. Reyes, thanked her, let her out, and then sat at the kitchen table in the quiet apartment and thought about things he didn't know how to think about yet. What he kept coming back to was not the mystery of the eyes, not the mystery of the shared childhood he didn't remember, not even the question of what genetics might tell them about why 3 people shared a trait that nobody could explain. What he kept coming back to was simpler than all of that. Aurora Bennett, standing in the dark of her own showroom, looking at a car she had repaired when she was 17, and her grandfather was dying, and saying, it came out the way it needed to. That was the thing he kept coming back to, because he understood it, not abstractly, in his bones. He had a daughter he was raising alone in an apartment in Miami while finishing out a military career that had taken 13 years and 1 piece of his memory, and it had not come out the way he'd planned. It had come out the way it needed to. And there was something in that, in meeting someone who understood that particular thing without needing it explained, that felt more significant than mysteries about genetics and childhood summers. He went to bed. He did not dream about the Green Park. He dreamed instead about a pink car on a highway at night, moving very fast, and a woman driving it who was not afraid of the speed. He dreamed about the road the way it looks from the passenger seat when someone else is driving and you trust them completely. The white lines resolving out of the dark, the engine's low note, the sense of motion as something chosen rather than something happening to you. He woke just before 6, which was when he always woke, the habit of years of military mornings overriding whatever civilian schedule he tried to establish. He lay in the early gray light and listened to the apartment, the traffic on Brickell already building below, the sound of Lily's steady breathing from the other room, the refrigerator's hum. He thought, this is my life, not with dissatisfaction, with the particular deliberate gratitude of a man who had been in enough places that weren't safe to understand what safe felt like. He woke up the next morning, looked at Lily eating cereal and narrating the process to herself, and thought, Monday, 8 o'clock, and he was already looking forward to it. The weekend was long. Aurora had learned, over the years, to use weekends as the brain's maintenance window, the time when the operational mind stepped back and the processing happened underneath, the way computers ran updates in the background while the screen stayed dark. She ran along the waterfront on Saturday morning, 6 miles, the Miami heat already building at 7 a.m. into something that felt like a physical presence. She reviewed quarterly financials from the aviation subsidiary. She had dinner with her friend Celia, who was an architect, and the only person in Aurora's life who was allowed to ask personal questions. Celia asked, over the second glass of wine, why Aurora seemed different. Different how? Aurora asked. Quiet, Celia said. Not distant, just quiet, like you're listening to something. Aurora considered this. Something happened at the gala. Good something or complicated something? Both. Want to talk about it? Not yet. Celia nodded, because Celia understood the difference between not ready and never. And she changed the subject to the new project she was designing for a client in Coconut Grove. And Aurora spent the rest of the dinner listening with genuine interest, while the other part of her brain continued, quietly and persistently, its work. On Sunday, she drove the pink Challenger down to the Keys and back, 4 hours round trip, no destination, just motion. This was another thing she had always done when she needed to think. She drove. Her grandfather had told her once that cars were the American way of meditating. You can't do anything else, he'd said, except drive. So you just drive, and things sort themselves out. She drove. The overseas highway unspooled ahead of her in the early morning light, the bridges lifting the road over channels of water that changed color as the sun climbed, gray-green at dawn, then a turquoise so sharp it looked synthetic, then a deep jeweled blue as the morning committed fully to itself. She had made this drive dozens of times. It never got ordinary. The water on both sides made it impossible for the drive to be ordinary. You were suspended out here, neither fully on land nor at sea, moving through something that felt more like geography than simply road. She thought about Marcus Cole's hands on the Corvette's hood, the way he'd crouched to examine the rocker panels with the focused appreciation of someone who understood what he was looking at. She had met a lot of men who wanted to appear knowledgeable about cars in her showroom, and she had developed over the years a reliable sense for the difference between performance and genuine understanding. Marcus had not been performing. He had been simply, quietly, knowing a thing that he knew. She thought about his voice when he talked about Lily, how it changed, how the careful, contained quality of him opened slightly, like a window when the latch releases, not all the way, not dramatically, but enough. Enough to let you understand what was behind it. She thought about the key, turning in his fingers. She drove south. She drove north. The water on both sides of the highway turned gold in the midday heat, and the Challenger's engine moved through the miles with a low, steady authority. And somewhere around the halfway point back to Miami, something settled inside her chest. Things began, slowly, to sort themselves out. By the time she was back in Miami, crossing the bridge with the city spread out in front of her and the evening light turning the bay into hammered gold, she had arrived at a few conclusions. First, whatever the connection between her and Marcus Cole, childhood, genetics, the inexplicable pull of his presence, she would not act on it impulsively again. The kiss had happened. She did not regret it, but she would not repeat the impulsiveness. If there was something here worth understanding, it deserved patience. Second, the question of Lily's eyes mattered, and not primarily because of any romantic possibility. It mattered because a 5-year-old girl was going to grow up asking where she came from. And if Aurora could help answer that question, if the connection between their families was what she was beginning to think it might be, then that girl deserved to know. Third, she was going to need to make a phone call, not to the private investigator, to her mother. Her mother, who had been her grandfather's daughter and who knew things about the family history that Aurora had never thought to ask about, because the past had always seemed less urgent than the future. Her mother, who lived in Charlotte now and called every Sunday and was patiently waiting, as she always waited, for Aurora to have the conversation they'd been circling for years. Aurora called her from the parking garage. "Mom," she said, when her mother picked up on the second ring, "tell me everything you know about Grandpa's friend Robert Cole, from Nashville." A pause. "Aurora," her mother said carefully, "what happened?" "Something I don't fully understand yet," Aurora said. "Just tell me about Robert Cole." Her mother was quiet for a long moment, and then she began to talk. And as she talked, the shape of the thing that Aurora had been circling all weekend began to clarify, the way the horizon clarifies when you've been driving toward it for long enough, and the distance finally becomes the detail you needed. She sat in her car in the parking garage with the engine off and the Miami night pressing at the windows, and she listened to her mother talk about two men who had served in the same unit in Korea, who had come home changed in the ways that war changed men, who had stayed close in the quiet, determined way of people who have seen the same unbearable things and decided together to survive them. She listened to her mother talk about how close the families had been, how Robert's wife, Elaine, had been like a sister to Aurora's grandmother, how the children had played together every summer. And then her mother said something that made Aurora close her eyes. "Sweetheart," her mother said, "there's something I probably should have told you a long time ago, about your grandfather and Robert, and about why their families were so close, about what they found out toward the end, when they had both boys, your grandfather's son and Robert's boy Marcus, tested." Aurora opened her eyes. "What did they find out?" she asked. "That they were brothers," her mother said quietly. "Half-brothers. Same father, a man neither of them had known existed. They found out when Marcus was about 13. Your grandfather was so happy. He'd always said Robert felt like family, and then it turned out Robert actually was." A pause. "I don't think Marcus ever really knew the full story. He was young, and then he enlisted, and then I heard there was some kind of accident." Aurora sat very still in her car. Her grandfather and Robert Cole had been half-brothers, which meant that Marcus Cole was her grandfather's nephew. Her family, which meant that Lily's eyes, the amber gold, the genetic anomaly that appeared and disappeared across generations, were not an anomaly at all. They were a family trait, passed from a great-grandfather neither Marcus nor Aurora had known, through two lines of the same family that had been separated and reunited and separated again, surfacing at last in a little girl eating cereal and brickle and narrating her own breakfast to herself. Aurora had been looking for a mystery. She had found a family instead. She sat in the parking garage for a long time after the call ended. She thought about Marcus Cole driving home in his black Corvette with his hands at 10 and 2. She thought about Lily, asleep by now, curled with her dark curls on the pillow and her amber gold eyes closed against whatever dream she was in. She thought about Monday morning. She thought about what it meant to walk into a room with information this heavy and say, "I know something you don't know, and it's going to change things." She thought about how her grandfather had always called her eyes winter honey and said they came from somewhere far back, and how he had said it with a particular quietness that she had never, until tonight, thought to question. She started the car. She drove home. She did not sleep well. She lay in the dark and thought about a boy she had known for a handful of summers and forgotten in the ordinary way of childhood, and about the 31-year-old man that boy had become, and about the gap in his memory where those summers should be. She thought about what it meant to be the person who held someone else's story when they couldn't hold it themselves. She thought about how carefully she would need to carry it. And sometime before dawn, in the particular quiet of a city that never fully stopped, she made a decision. She would tell him all of it, not with the hesitation she'd shown at the gala, not in fragments. Everything she knew, as clearly as she could say it. And then she would wait. And whatever came from it, whatever shape this took, whatever the truth of their families made possible or impossible between them, she would meet it the way she met everything, with her eyes open. Monday morning arrived the way mornings do in Miami in October, sudden and golden, the sun clearing the edge of the Atlantic with an authority that made darkness seem like it had only ever been a temporary condition. At the Bennett Automotive Group showroom on Brickell Avenue, the overnight cleaning crew had just finished their sweep. The chandeliers threw their warm amber light across the polished concrete. The Highland Green Mustang stood in its corner like a patient landmark. The carbon flash Corvette waited near the entrance, hood gleaming. At 7:58 a.m., Aurora Bennett unlocked the front door of her own building. At 8:01 a.m., before a dark gray pickup truck pulled into the parking lot, the black Corvette, Marcus's weekend car, the one without room for car seats or 5-year-olds, was parked at home. And in the passenger seat, peering out the window with enormous amber gold eyes at the pink car in the reserved space, a 5-year-old girl said, "Daddy, that lady has a pink car. I want to meet the lady with the pink car." Marcus Cole turned off the engine and sat very still for a moment. "Yeah, Bug," he said quietly. "I think you're going to." He didn't know yet what Aurora had learned over the weekend. He didn't know about the phone call, or what her mother had said, or the weight of the history that was waiting for him inside that building. He just knew that his hands were steady on the wheel, and that when he reached for the door handle, Lily was already unbuckling her seatbelt, leaning forward with the total commitment of a child who has decided that something interesting is about to happen. He was right there with her. The first thing Lily Cole said when she walked through the door of Bennett Automotive Group was, "That car smells like lemons." She said it with the complete authority of a 5-year-old stating a scientific fact. Aurora was standing near the front desk when they came in. She had seen the dark gray truck pull into the lot. She had watched Marcus help Lily out of the passenger side, the child moving with the urgency of someone who had run out of patience precisely at the moment of arrival. She had taken a breath. Then she had walked to the center of the showroom and waited. Marcus came through the door with his hand resting lightly on Lily's shoulder, not directing her, just present. He was in a navy gray t-shirt and jeans, and there was something about seeing him without the gala's formality that made him more, rather than less, more grounded, more real. "It does smell like lemons," Aurora said. "We use citrus oil on the concrete. It's better than industrial cleaner." Lily looked at her. The amber gold eyes scanned, assessed, arrived at a conclusion. "Your car is pink," Lily said. "Yes, I want a pink car." "Lily," Marcus said, with the measured patience of a man who had said his daughter's name in exactly that tone thousands of times and expected to say it thousands more. "She's right," Aurora said. "Pink is an excellent choice." She crouched down to Lily's level, which put them almost eye to eye. "I'm Aurora. I'm Lily." A pause. "My dad said you know a lot about cars." "I do." "Do you know about the red cars?" "Which red cars?" "The fast ones." "Ferrari?" Lily considered this with great seriousness. "Maybe." Aurora stood. She looked at Marcus, who was watching his daughter with an expression that belonged entirely to him, that particular open warmth that came into his face when Lily was in the room, uncalculated and total. "Thank you for coming," Aurora said. "Thank you for the 8 o'clock, he said. They looked at each other. The weight of the weekend, the phone call, the revelation, the history between them was present in the room. Neither moved toward it immediately. Some things needed to be circled before they could be approached, and they both understood this without discussion. "Lily," Marcus said, "stay where I can see you while I talk to Miss Bennett." Lily was already moving toward the Mustang. "I'm looking at the green car. Stay where I can see you." "I'm staying." Marcus watched her go. Then he looked at Aurora. "You learned something," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Is it the kind of thing I'm going to want to sit down for?" Aurora considered. "Maybe." He nodded. He looked at Lily, who had stationed herself in front of the Mustang and was examining it with her hands clasped behind her back, the posture of a small person who has been told not to touch things and is obeying through pure force of will. "Tell me," he said. She told him. This time she told him all of it, not just the shape, but the detail. The phone call with her mother, the two half-brothers who had served together in Korea and discovered, late in life, that they had been family all along. The shared father neither had known. The closeness of the families that had always felt like more than friendship, because it was more than friendship. The fact that when Marcus was 13, old enough for the truth to mean something, but young enough that it hadn't fully landed before everything changed. The enrollment, the years away, the accident, the gap. Marcus listened. He was still in the way he was still when something mattered. Not rigid, not braced, but present in a complete way that meant the information was going somewhere rather than bouncing off. When she finished, the silence lasted about 10 seconds. "Your grandfather," he said, "was my father's half-brother." "Yes." "Which makes you your second cousin, roughly." He absorbed this. He looked at Lily, who had moved on from the Mustang and was now standing beside the pink Challenger with an expression of pure devotion. "Lily's eyes," he said. A family trait, Aurora said, not an anomaly, something that's been in the line the whole time. She paused. She has a family she didn't know about. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He turned the key between his fingers once, slowly. My father knew, he said, and he never told me. He may have tried. The timing, no, he said it without anger. He was a man who carried things quietly. A pause. He still is. You could ask him. Yeah, he looked at her. Yeah, I could. Something shifted in his expression. The processing done, arriving at the other side. Aurora, yes, I need to tell you something. Okay, I've been thinking about this since Friday night. He looked down at the key. About the fact that my brain is telling me I know you, and I don't know how much to trust that because of the TBI, the confabulation. But I've also been thinking about the fact that you kissed me in your own showroom, which suggests you were feeling something you didn't fully understand either. Both true, Aurora said. I don't know what this is, he said. I know the facts now, the family, the history, the eyes, but I don't know what that means for the two of us today. I'm not in a position to know yet. Neither am I, Aurora said, but I'd like to find out. The morning light came through the showroom windows at a low October angle, catching the chandeliers and throwing small prismatic shapes across the floor. Across the room, Lily had discovered the key display near the service desk and was examining each one with the attention of a collector. My grandfather used to say, Aurora said, that the most important things happen slowly, that you don't find them, you arrive at them. Marcus looked at her. He sounds like a man worth knowing. He was. She paused. You would have liked each other. Tell me about him. So she did. She told him about a Korean War veteran named Thomas Bennett who had built a small automotive repair shop in Nashville with borrowed money, repaid in 3 years, who had loved cars for the engineering, the honesty of machines that either worked or didn't, who had kept a photograph of Robert Cole on his workbench for 30 years, who had told his granddaughter when she was 12 and asking why, that some friendships were too important to explain and too real to forget. Marcus listened. He asked questions, real ones, specific ones, the questions of a man who wanted the details because the details were the thing. And Aurora realized, as she talked, that she was doing something she had not done in years, telling someone about her grandfather without editing, without managing the story into something presentable, just telling it, all of it, the difficult parts alongside the good ones. It felt like the passenger door of the Mustang, intuitive, uneven in places, hers. Lily appeared at Marcus's elbow. Dad, she said, the lady at the desk said I could sit in the green car if you said okay. Marcus looked at Aurora. Absolutely, Aurora said. Lily's face did what 5-year-old faces do when they receive exactly the news they wanted. A brightness so complete, it was almost structural. Come on, Aurora said. I'll show you. She led Lily to the Mustang. Marcus followed a few steps behind. She opened the driver's door, and Lily climbed in with the practiced confidence of a child who climbs into things for a living. Her small hands found the steering wheel. She looked straight ahead through the windshield with profound seriousness. Where are we going? Lily asked. Where do you want to go? Lily thought about it. Nashville, she said. Marcus went still. Aurora looked at him over the roof of the car. He was looking at his daughter, at the amber gold eyes above the steering wheel, at the small, serious face that was pointed toward wherever Nashville was from here. Okay, Aurora said. She rested her arms on the roof of the car and looked at Lily. Nashville it is. Have you been there? Lily asked. I have, a long time ago. My grandpa lives there. I know. Lily turned to look at her with the directness that 5-year-olds reserve for questions they've been thinking about for a while. How do you know my grandpa? The morning light fell across the showroom floor. The chandeliers caught it and gave it back in amber. Aurora looked at Marcus. He was watching her, not directing her, not telling her what to say, just present, steady, the way he was steady at the wheel with his hands at 10 and 2. She looked back at Lily. Our families, Aurora said carefully, have known each other for a very long time, longer than you've been alive, longer than your dad has been alive. She paused. We just lost track of each other for a while, the way people sometimes do. Lily considered this with great seriousness. Like when I lost my rabbit at Grandma's house, she asked. And then we found it in the laundry? Exactly like that, Aurora said. Lily nodded, satisfied. She turned back to the windshield and put both hands on the wheel again. Okay, she said. We can go now. Marcus made a sound that was not quite a laugh, something warmer, something that came from below ordinary laughter. Aurora met his eyes across the roof of the Highland Green Mustang, and she held his gaze. The key was still in his fingers. He wasn't turning it anymore. He was just holding it, the way you hold something you finally stopped being afraid of losing. Outside, Miami went about its enormous business, and in a showroom on Brickell Avenue, 3 people with the same amber gold eyes sat with the stillness of a story that has been a long time arriving and has finally, after everything, arrived.